But for this week's Bane special feature, we have Konami, and I believe that you're going to give a retrospective or your thoughts on this small little Japanese company.
Oh, what a surprise. We're talking about Konami? Really? Oh, man. Who would have
Konami.
known?
We should have flagged it earlier. We should have
Oh,
flagged it
man. We
earlier.
talked about Contra. We talked about Castlevania. Oh, man. Yeah, Konami. Look, I'm not going to give a history over about it. Everyone that is into games
Oh,
knows Konami.
I thought you were going to be like Norm from the Game Historian.
Nah,
That's what I was ready to receive.
you're ready to receive Norm. Okay, all right. Oh, well, I remember that. There we go. That's the episode title. So look, the reason I want to talk about Konami is actually not because we're talking about a Contra board game or by chance the Castlevania anime series came up. It's actually because there was a news story this week that they're actually entering the PC gaming hardware market. Now, if they've actually released them before in the past, then I'm not sure about that, but it was a big enough news story and people are surprised. And I thought, what the hell is going on with Konami at this point? There's all the jokes, the F Konami news from Jim Sterling and everything like it. We all joke about it, and then there's obviously the topics which I'll mention that are less joking about how they've treated employees and the whole Hideo Kojima stuff. But what are they doing right now? So, if anyone doesn't know, obviously Konami is a Japanese developer, but they've been around since 1969, and they clearly just don't make video games, because if they were just making video games at this moment, they wouldn't be in business because they haven't put any out in so long. But they make trading cards, anime, live action, things like Godzilla style stuff. But they make a lot of their money from slot machines and pachinko machines. So I've actually been in a pokies venue in Australia and seen Konami logos on the side of the pokey machines. So
Oh,
yeah,
really?
100%. Yeah,
Cool.
and it's so obviously that's a big market to be in the gambling industry. Whether or not I'm very much against pokies personally, but it's a big
Yeah.
business. Whether or not, and it brings in a lot of money for governments and everything like that. So Konami's got their finger in that pie. So, but in terms of video games, I mean, last year they released the Arcade Classics Anniversary Collection, Castlevania as an Anniversary Collection, and the Contra Anniversary Collection. Interestingly, I actually own two of those, so I've been contributed to their income for that year. But the only new game, at least on console, that they actually brought out was Contra Rogue Corps, or Rogue Core, I should say. And look, as much as everyone was excited, oh my god, there's a new Contra, by all accounts, you have to struggle to find anything positive said about that game online. It seems like they completely dropped the ball
Oh,
with
yeah.
that game.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
love Contra. I love Super Contra, Contra 1. I love Super Pro Protector, which is Contra 3, outside of Australia. I love those games. I even love Contra Hardcore as well on the Genesis, even though I only ever played that on emulator. But this year, they've released even less. So they've released DLC updates for Pro Evolution Soccer, which is the big money maker, which is called Winning 11 in
Yeah, but
Japan.
just on that though, they also dropped the ball with that. Like they kind of basically said, look, we're really looking at the next gen version of that game. So we're sort of giving a discounted version of the game. It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's basically just roster updates, by all accounts.
Yeah.
And
like it's literally dialing it in. Like literally.
And depending on when it comes out, potentially that Stadia Bomberman game, because they own the Bomberman franchise. So that's from such a renowned developer in years past, at least. What is going on there? Like they haven't even you wouldn't. I think they've done ports to mobiles. Like I'm not talking about mobile specific stuff at this point because it gets very murky there, and a lot of that stuff doesn't even come to Western mobile platforms. But just to kind of give an idea to people that aren't exactly sure what they have under their umbrella, you've got the big hitters. No, so you've got your Castlevania. We mentioned Contra. Dance Dance Revolution, right, which is obviously more of an arcade thing. Pro Evolution Soccer we mentioned. Then, of course, Metal Gear and Silent Hill, these huge franchises. Now, something like Metal Gear, obviously, there's a complication that Kojima doesn't work there anymore, and they tried their hand at something without him, and it didn't go so well. Metal Gear Survive. But then they've also got, like, we talked about Bomberman, right? At least they're doing something with him. But, they've got Frogger, Gradius, Mystical Ninja, like Suikoden. We mentioned that Aiden Chronicles. Like, they haven't released a new Suikoden game in how bloody long? Just the.
Well, yeah, and you can see why there's a spiritual successor. I
Exactly.
mean, they're the studio of spiritual successors.
Exactly. And even just like random things like Bloody Raw franchise, not that that's going to make them a lot of money, but Rocket Knight, the Zone of the Enders have got so many cool IPs that they're not doing anything with. And what if.
Oh, and it's beyond cool IPs though. I mean, like, if you take Metal Gear and Castlevania, they're probably like up there as like S tier IPs.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like legitimate, like maybe in the industry you have, I don't even know what the number is, like 20 IPs of that level. And like it's genuinely they have those. And then they have, yeah, like you're saying, a suite of others that people would kill
there's
for.
not going to be a AAA Adventure Island game anytime soon, but it's still an IP you have. Or at least, sorry, I should say these are franchises that have released in the past. If some of those IPs have moved around, then I'm not sure, but my understanding is a lot of these are still with them, right?
Well, like in Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Like Silent Hill is like outside of Resident Evil is probably still regarded as maybe the second best horror franchise. Like I can't really think of anything that would be competing with it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and what a lot of people have said, and I agree, is they should, if they're not going to use this IP, first of all, obviously there's business to be made, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, the business decisions, but why aren't they not at least getting other developers to make games of these, right, and publish them? The thing is, I understand that they haven't they probably don't have the dev teams they would have had when they're making those big titles. It's not like, interestingly, I've got some stories about that from a while back, but they they're not going to have these big devs just lying around doing nothing if they're not making games. So I understand it's not like you can just start making AAA games at the drop of a hat, but you've got these IPs that are huge, and if not, why don't you actually offload some of them? It's so, like, as people complain about Capcom all the time, but oh my god, Capcom is like, they're saints compared to Konami in terms of how they treat their IP. At least.
Well, I think that's more recent as well, right? Like they've done a lot of good things recently. I think if you talked about this maybe 2 years ago, it'd be pretty close. But yeah, Konami's gotten worse and Capcom has delivered a lot more recently.
I still think they'd still be far and above how Konami have acted. When I'm talking about Konami, I'm talking probably the last 4 years, right? They're just,
yeah.
It's like they have just dropped off the face of the planet in terms of video game development. And as a kid, I would love seeing the Konami screen, like, playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, and Super Probotector, and the Konami logo would come up on screen with the white background, the orange and the red. I'd be like, oh man, this is awesome. I love Konami, and they're just, you almost expect studios to close down. They've just kind of just faded into nothing at this point from a video game standpoint.
I mean, they made so many good games that they had to make up a separate publisher and studio and lie and say it was as if it was from someone else, because Nintendo had limits on how many games a single publisher could release. But they were just like sending out bangers. Like outside of Nintendo, I mean, question without notice, outside of Nintendo, off the top of your head, you'd probably take Konami as the best publisher. Like, and including all the games that aren't officially called Konami, but are actually Konami games. I can't think of another publisher outside of Nintendo that I'd take the suite of games as like, that would be the best library.
Well, definitely, especially from a Japanese standpoint. Like, I love a lot of Square's output, but Square also, make a lot of games that I'm not fond of. And with Konami, just when you just look at Castlevania and Contra, and I love the Metal Gear series, it's like, man, what happened? And
well, okay, can I explain it to you?
Okay, go ahead.
So, okay, like, I'm a financial person, it's actually pretty simple. It's pretty simple. This company is not a gaming company. This company, it literally is referred to as a gambling equipment company in Japan. And when you're talking about it in financial press, it doesn't. It makes about 10% of its money from gaming. So like, and I don't mean like gambling. So I'm talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
video
I
games.
know.
It makes
I know.
about 10% from video games. The problem is like the way it's structured, and like this is kind of like what happens in these kind of companies. And yes, they could sell off their IP. I wouldn't be shocked if they did that. I don't think they will, and I don't think that's a logical thing to do either. But essentially, what's happening is their gaming, so video game division. Just looking at some of the financial results, it's actually kind of humming along pretty well. Like it's actually sort of having 5% year on year increases. So from a P&L perspective, it's actually not doing too poorly, the gaming division. So it's not a division that you go, oh, get rid of this division because it's suffering or losing money or going down the drain. It's actually still making money. So whatever they're doing from a P&L perspective, like re-releasing a lot of these old games, putting them in packages, people are buying them.
But they're
So
not
if
even
you're
doing
like,
that this year. That's the thing is like the output
yeah, I
this year
know,
is so
but like,
pitiful.
as like ultimately, that's not saying that they're not selling games, right? So they could still be selling games that they released last year that, people are buying Switches. Oh, yeah, I love these old Contra games. Oh, yeah, I love these old games, that Konami released. They're buying them. Castlevania recently, all that kind of stuff. And, if you're the board, shareholders, CEO, 10% of your company and it's just humming along, you just don't care about. Like, that's ultimately what happens. And they would not be thinking about this. And that's why I kind of look at it and go, they're not going to do anything with their IP until they start to really suffer and that division starts to lose money. Because it's still making money, by the way. It's still making healthy profit, that division. They're not going to do anything with it. So, unfortunately, from my perspective, unless they have someone internal in the company that becomes a real champion to change this and sort of looks at it and goes, you know what, guys, there's a huge opportunity here. We can make a lot more money. Yes, it won't be the equivalent of our gambling part, but, we could easily double what we're making in this space. It's just not going to like move the needle internally. So unfortunately, I feel like they kind of need to really, really suffer from their video game division before they'll see change. And like my prediction based on looking at these numbers, we're probably going to just keep seeing what they're doing for many years to come. Like this is something that takes a long time to turn around. So unfortunately, I reckon it could be like another 4 or 5 year thing where they don't really do anything with their IPs in a really effective way.
And it's so true, and it's such a shame. And you've got to think at some point that some of this stuff starts to devalue, in line with the reputation of them as a developer. That reputation is shot at the point. I know that it's been shot for a while. It's Now I don't think they're, for instance, I don't see them making a new Metal Gear for a while. Just simply because
Oh
of
yeah, after Metal
yeah,
Gear Survive, yeah.
and just everything that like as much as love or hate Kojima, he was so integral to the backbone and the DNA of the Metal Gear series that it's kind of hard to really
Yeah.
move on from that. It's yeah, and but it's just a shame looking at it from, I guess, from the perspective as okay, a whole bunch of these are franchises that you love, and they're just dwindling. They're just nothing's happening. And look, I'll say, as I said, I bought the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. I bought the Contra one. I actually think I bought the Contra one on Xbox. Realized it was on special on Switch and bought it there as well because I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to prefer to play that, handheld. And
Yeah.
just playing those games is also like I was playing through Castlevania Bloodlines. I never played that; it was only on the Genesis, or at least it wasn't on the SNES. And I'm like, man, like these games are so good, and it's just a shame that nothing's happening with them. At least we do have your Bloodstained, and we've got hopefully Aiden Chronicles is also good. So we're getting to relive some of that. Get the our fix from other sources there, and obviously Igarashi, behind the Bloodstained series, he was so critical to that the Symphony Night and onwards era of Castlevania. But it's just such a shame that I would. like outside of Bomberman, because I think Bomberman's got such appeal, and people don't think of Bomberman as a Konami game. It was from Hudson originally. It's just a shame that that we're not going to get a lot of new games from them for a while. Like, I'd love to see a new Rocket Knight game. The last Rocket Knight game they made, which was on Xbox 360, I'm guessing it was also on PS3, was fantastic. It probably wasn't developed by them, but obviously it was published by them. I'm like, Goemon or Mystical Ninja, these are kind of games, franchises I love, and we're not going to see any new game from them if they don't do something. And that just sucks, man. It just sucks.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like there's the analytical side, like what do I think will happen, and is it logical from a financial point of view? Like it's very logical from a financial point of view what they're doing, but from just a lover of games, like it sucks. Like I'm a huge handheld fan, and probably Metroidvanias are like maybe that's my favorite genre, and the trilogy of Castlevania games on the Game Boy Advance, which I'll be playing in my analog pocket next year. They're my jam, man. Those games, that trilogy, like I played the hell out of those games. Like I love them so much. Like I actually booted one of them up recently, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe how much of this is flooding back to me, because I just played them religiously, like on the trains and at uni and everything. So yeah, like if they announced a new Castlevania game, maybe like a Symphony of the Night, or like even a more pared back version as like a new game, like I would be going insane about that. Like that would be, I'd probably pay full retail price for that game if it was just the same experience. Like I would love that. I would definitely play that.
Have you played Bloodstained yet?
So on that, I wanted to play it on the Switch because if it's sort of like on multiple platforms and it's around the same price, I generally like to play it on the Switch just because of the portability. And, also being a dad, it actually is really critical to be able to just step out of a game really quickly. And I love that about the Switch, that you just press the power button and it freezes the game. It's something that most people probably don't care that much about. But to me, that's become a huge thing that's helpful. Just how it landed on there, it just was so poor. I was like, wow, okay. I probably won't get it on that. I'm kind of holding out because I know they are updating it. If they can get an update that's pretty similar, like I'll look to play it. But if they can't, then I'll probably just go and get it on either PC or PlayStation 4, or I guess, whatever the next consoles are.
Yeah, and because I've only played the first couple of hours of that game, and they delivered on that. What can you say? But it's still just like, I'd love a new Mystical Ninja game. Like we haven't had one in so long. I'm not expecting to ever get one. It'd be cool if they even made a collection or something of that. But it's it's just it's one of those situations where it's understandable from the business standpoint, but it just sucks. It just sucks.
And it does, and it's like it's a bit unfortunate because I feel like the most logical course of action would be like the real thing that could happen is like a Sony or Microsoft buy the IPs for like $4 billion or whatever it would have to be. It'd have to be big numbers, and it kind of just doesn't make sense because Sony doesn't need it, and Microsoft I think would. Like imagine if Microsoft had Konami's IPs. Like Microsoft, the exclusive place to play Castlevania, Metal Gear. Like that's insane, right?
I wish. Look, they wouldn't. They don't have the money for it, but I wish Capcom somehow could buy them, or at least.
Oh, that's.
I know it's never gonna happen, but like to me, they would be the perfect developer to take the reins.
But I'm trying to talk about something in the realm of reality.
To me, it's not that unrealistic that they could potentially, like. Essentially, what they do, they've done it before with many Konami titles. Is just license the title out, get another developer to make it. Why not do that?
But it's not likely to happen because they're still making money. And I guess what I was trying to say before is you got to realize this is a very minor part of their business that is humming away nicely. So from a a dollar sense. They
I'm
just look at it and go, "Oh, it's
I
going
know what you're
fine."
saying, but I'm saying I think that because they've done that before, that is a possible scenario as opposed to selling the IP. They've actually for instance, Contra. There was a hardcore uprising, right? It was a Contra
Mm,
game, but it was kind of a spiritual sequel in a way to hardcore. But it was, and that was made by a different developer, and
yeah.
surely there's a revenue model where that makes sense, where they don't take on the burden of the development, but they're able to at least get financial gain out of it.
Yeah, sure. Like, from a strategic point of view, like for me, they need to tap into people that love these IPs that have demonstrated experience and ability to make these style of games in the
Mm,
past. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of, like the way forwards of the world, like a lot of these people who have made
exactly.
Metroidvanias. Like you go, hey, here's Castlevania. Do you want to make $1 billion? Here's a pretty good way to do it. But again, the fact that they're not doing that indicates to me the leadership is just not interested in
Yeah.
doing that. And until there's an internal sponsor and that changes, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. Unless there is, like I was saying, a big offer on the table from one of the, major players in consoles to try to get the IP off them. But I think the fact that Microsoft, is a Washington based company versus you've got Sony is Japanese. They don't really need the IPs as much as Microsoft does, and you haven't had a lot of history with American companies buying this kind of stuff from Japanese companies, so can't really see that happening. I know it's been rumored a lot, but I think that's more speculation than a
Mm.
real rumor. So yeah, it sucks, and unfortunately I don't see it changing anytime soon. I can't see Metal Gear 6 happening, and I know how people were talking about PT getting revived. I never believe that. I never believe that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just want someone to do something with these franchises, and at some point, I'm sure it will happen at some point for some of them, but I worry about those littler franchises that are just gonna just nothing's ever gonna happen with them. And not saying there should be a new Parodius game, but like that's what I said, like just something like Zone of the Enders. I know that's another
Mm.
Kojima kind of baby there, but these franchises, outside of potential remasters and releases, they're probably never going to see new titles. So that's a shame.
Not for a while. Now, the one thing I will call out is outside of situations where the creators have specifically said you cannot make further entries in this IP. And I call that out because that's what's happened with Back to the Future. The people who created that have actually put in like their will that you can't make further Back to the Future movies because they just don't want to see it happen, which is quite interesting. But I think, from a capitalism perspective, if you have a very strong IP that has a big rabid fan base, eventually something's going to be made from it. When they talked about Star Wars and they won't make any more Star Wars films, they're always going to make Star Wars films until we're dead. Just because it's got like a pull to it. And I think, especially Castlevania and Metal Gear, and to a lesser degree Silent Hill, but I'd say particularly those two, they have such a pull from people. They will make further games in the future. They will make a Metroidvania, Castlevania eventually, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, unfortunately, which kind of is a bit of a bummer.
Oh, well, here's hoping something happens.